retreatants. In this time of darkness, with its greed and violence and ignorance, it's important that there are areas of light in the gloom, something to balance all the heaviness and darkness. To my mind, the contemplatives and the solitary meditators are like lighthouses, beaming out love and compassion on the world. Because their beams are focused, they are very powerful. They become like generators, and they are extremely necessary. But I am not special. I am taking some advice that was given to me. Avoid contact with others, I was told, but seek help if it's needed. Your attitude on retreat should be like the Samantha meditation instructions. Not too tight and not too loose. Define your retreat boundaries in terms of physical situation and your needs and stick to them. And I followed this and listened well. When you're on retreat, you make a vow of how long you are going to go in and you stick to that. It's considered part of practice. Even if you are sick, you pledge that you will not come out. If necessary, you have to be prepared to die in retreat. This is considered quite auspicious, actually. I really did make this vow. My daughter asked me to please not die, and I worked at that not happening, and here I am. It didn't happen. So the Tibetans say, if you are sick, you're sick. If you die, you die. I listened to them. So why do we do this? Some are forced into solitude. I met with some of these men up at the state prison 2 weeks ago to talk about our similar experiences. I chose this silence. Solitary retreat can offer us an opportunity to explore the practices that we have learned and to begin to experience our life in an incredibly direct way. Buddhist scholar and teacher Reginald Ray writes, retreat practice is critical because it provides the most direct and effective way to attain personal realization of the teachings that one has received. A month's retreat can bring about maturation of practice and understanding that might take years of daily meditation when living an ordinary life. Are you listening, my meditators? Through retreat practice, we learn the pathway to the person we most long to be. Tenzin Palmo compared going on retreat to cooking food, and I like her points. So she points out that it's not very effective to turn the heat up high and then turn it off again. And the next day, turn it up for a while and then turn it off again. What's needed is a constant flame that gives enough time for all the ingredients to cook together thoroughly. A slow cooker is probably the best. That's called persistence. Yeah. It will take longer, but the food won't burn, and it will turn out delicious. And then I love to share this cucumber story because I love cucumbers. If you are a cucumber, you get pickled, not by one quick dunk into vinegar. It takes 6 months to do it. So I listened. Who? As I said, I am not special and I am not unique. I am a simple child from Lynn, raised on a street with 10 cousins and my grandmother's gardens, who lost her dad young and committed then to living an examined life, a deliberate life, so that when it was over, I would not say I had not lived. To not have regret, to know that this human form is one with great difficulty, to know that from my childhood experience that life is easy to lose. Life is a thing of beauty that disappears even as it comes into being. I have been moved by the words of J. Tsongkhapa, who urges to set a goal, to use each day and night to achieve it, and transcendence, awakening the way. What I did and what I learned, this is what I was waiting for. I could have just gotten these rules ahead of time and I would have saved myself a year. Huh? I went in with great curiosity and slowly, slowly was rewarded. I walked, I did some art, I did lots of writing and more of reflecting. I learned to just sit and watch the clouds and reflect, not think, just reflect. I sat in the deep, tangled, dense bush with my cup of tea and listened to what it could teach me. Some people might wonder if they ever came across me sitting there in the bush with my tea, just looking at a spider web. Yeah. From the bush, I learned of beauty, simple and harsh, of birds and insects, of possums and rats, of the life cycle of tree ferns. I watched the clouds, the rising mist. I learned of the deep pervasiveness of solitude and what that does to one. I looked at thought and no thought, at pride and confidence, and forgiveness and friendship and fear. I learned about myself and the habits and emotions that keep me from enlightenment, as they say, of my faults and delusions, of my flaws and past transgressions. I learned to forgive myself and forgive others. I learned more of silence and aloneness, mine and others. I studied the writings of those that had done this before me, Tenzin Palmo, Admiral Richard Byrd, Henry David Thoreau, Milarepa, Thomas Merton, Bob Cole, who was off the coast of Chile for a year, the Desert Fathers and Mothers from the Christian tradition, and followed some of their dropped breadcrumbs and was grateful. They were often with me during those long days and nights. They knew what I know, what I was learning. They inspired me. I studied the moon and lived by its phases, a constant friend in my life over 12 months. I studied solitude and emptiness. I learned of the illusionary nature of all phenomena. I learned of fear. When another retreatant in the tangled, deep bush manifested his psychotic breakdown, screamed at demons throughout the night, convinced the team that he should stay for another month, and then, unfortunately, was taken away by police after assaulting someone. Not me, thank goodness. Fear, when it grabs you by the neck and throws you to the ground, and no one is there to help you or hear you. I learned that the only way out of this was to let go, to open my hands, to send love to self and to others, to that fear that had me. And I thought about the incarcerated and restrained people living under harsh, noisy lives full of chaos. I thought of what I might bring home to them, what opportunity that life, perhaps in prison, might present. I learned of letting go of self, learned of being present, of being patient. That's a hard one for me. Waiting 5 months for a package of dyes to arrive, 5 months for a note from a friend, 100 days for a book lost in the mails, which, by the way, was called 100 Days of Solitude. We ended up with 2 copies down there at the end. Patience and illusion. I came out of this not the same person that went in. It was impossible not to be transformed in some way by this experience of 360 days. I come out with eyes wide open and a heart more present, facing stuff. Kamala Shila, from my tradition, says solitary retreat is most definitely an undiluted experience of yourself. There's a lot of people that don't want to go there. It can be scary. Nowhere to go, nowhere to hide, nothing to distract you, Not even Cherry Garcia ice cream. I had none for a year. No coffee, too. To have your entire life flash through your mind in slow motion. A 9th century Sufi master described the experience so clearly, I want to read this to you. It's short. I was flabbergasted when I found this mirror. For 12 years at a stretch, I was a smith, like blacksmith, a smith to my own being. I laid it on the hearth of asceticism, heated it red hot in the fires of ordeals, set it on the anvil of fear, and pounded it with the hammer of admonition. Thus I made it into a mirror that served me to gaze at myself for 5 years, during which time I never ceased to dissolve that rust from this mirror by acts of piety and devotion. For 30 years I went in search of God, he continues on, and when at the end of that time I opened my eyes and I discovered that it was he who had been looking for me. Good Sufi. A few notes on solitary confinement since I'm just coming out of prison. It was great to have that experience. And I'm referring to Concord, not. It's generally perceived as harsh punishment and solitary confinement, and is presently being outlawed in the state of California, as I speak. On the other hand, less rigorous conditions of imprisonment have sometimes proved quite fruitful. Being cut off from the distractions of ordinary life can encourage the prisoner, with creative potential especially, to call upon resources of his own or her own imagination. This is from Anthony Storr of Solitude. Several notable examples exist which demonstrate that partial solitude and estrangement from normal life, even in prison, can encourage creative production. You knew that I was an artist, right? Yes, so I'm connected with this. Even when all is taken away, when all is destroyed, there is something to see. And there was Nian Chen falling in love with a small spider and its miraculous web, connecting with it daily during her 6 years of torture and solitary confinement in Shanghai. Robert Stroud discovering a small bird nest in the exercise yard and making it his life work over 43 years of silence in prison at Leavenworth, Kansas, Alcatraz, California. The foreign correspondence to China in the 1960s, Anthony Gray, incarcerated in a dark, windowless basement in Beijing for 2 years, teaching himself Chinese language and making up crossword puzzles. He spoke of making a lotus out of mud. Dr. Edith Bone, translating poems that she had memorized into the 6 languages she knew over the 7 years that she was held in a frigid, dark cell in Hungary. The mother of conductor Anatol Dorati, who kept her sanity in a Budapest prison cell as other Jews were being exterminated by methodically going through each part of the Beethoven quartets that she knew by heart. Some found a small part of beauty, even creativity, in the most harsh conditions and survived whole because of it. Strengthening. As my acupuncturist said, she's sitting in the front row, my core has been strengthened from 2,000 yoga postures of cat, cow, down, dog over 360 days. And perhaps more importantly, strengthened from dealing with deep fear, relying only on my own resources, from a deep connection high in the New Zealand bush with my Yidam, who allowed me to wear her robes, and that is Kuan Yin, the Bodhisattva of compassion. Strengthened through opening, bravely standing on a precipice in the howling wind, surviving, embracing day after day, week after week, month after month after month, from living the life a recluse, a hermit, a nun in a cave, and returning with arms wide open. And returning. Always carry one of these. Shall I admit to you that I was scared to come out? My confession, I'm being very transparent. So, after solitary, handle with care, a small poem that I wrote. Some of you saw it on the internet. Sitting without armor, able to manage in the bush with harsh conditions, but without the protection, without the protection for life in the streets and in the marketplace. Doe-eyed, unknowing, fragile, open-hearted, without a buffer